Hello, boxing fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining us on another episode of our Symposium series. And today, another special episode coming at you. We've got Trevor Lake, all the way from Brighton, UK, joining us, as well as one of his premier fighters, Nicola Hopewell, undefeated, I might add, fighters out of the Midlands, as we say. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us. And let's talk about issues facing women in boxing today still, which is unbelievable to me. But, I'm a fan. It's what I am. I'm not in the game per se, other than as a broadcaster and someone who's running this media channel on behalf of the boxing community. And we're expressing a lot of concern and because we're hearing it from the people who we're talking to. So all the way back to the 2012 Olympics, when after those Olympic Games, when women were finally allowed to fight, which is kind of surprising, but when they were finally allowed to fight at the Olympics, there seemed to be a lot of women joining boxing gyms, and not only joining boxing gyms, but getting into the ring and actually beginning to fight each other, which came, quite frankly, as a surprise to a lot of people. Why would that beautiful young lady decide to get in there and clobber? Anyway, so there was that issue, just getting around the whole, shall we say, sexist mentality thing. It's a man's sport. No, it's not. We've done a lot of pieces on the history of the sport and how women were fighting back in the 1800s. In fact, I'm sure they've fought forever. But anyway, today we're here to talk about the issues that still face women who want to enter the ring and who want to engage in a career, quite frankly, in the sport of boxing. So who should I ask first? Like other than money, because we have to address the issue of money. I think it'll come up in our conversation. But other than money, another, shall we say, the sexism, the blatant sexism that exists from men towards women. Maybe Nicola, maybe you can start off. Like, how's it gone for you in terms of your progression from the amateur ranks to the professional ranks? You've got a couple of good fights coming up this year. But how's it going for you in facing some of the issues, like these common issues I've just talked about?
Up to now, I've been all right, to be fair. I only turned professional at the back end of 2019, and to say that we was in a pandemic last year, I still managed to get 3 fights in, and I've got some good fights in back end of this year coming up. I guess the pool isn't massive. I guess one of the issues is like opponents, and with the pandemic, one of my opponents did pull out because of the COVID issue, and then because the pool's so small, I ended up doing a rematch with the girl that I had to fight that I fought on the fight before that. So I guess like the pool's not very big for women, which is quite an issue.
And I guess for you, Nicola, sorry, just interrupting. I mean, Nicola comes from Chris Ball's Xbox Fight Academy up in Worksop. And Chris, I mean, I know a lot of the subject at the moment is around the challenges that women face, professional fighters face, when trying to pursue their career. But for Nicola, and I hope you don't mind me saying, Nicola, I'm sure Chris would have, if he's listening or he gets to see this later on, he'll fully sort of agree. Chris has got a very diverse gym, and he's very proactive in ensuring that all the girls in the gym, that you're all treated as equal. The boys, the girls, they're all treated as equal. There's no preferential treatment. He encourages you all just the same, and he's very much enthused to make sure that all of the fighters in his gym, be they male or female, they get the same treatment, they get the same opportunities, and he's all about equality. I think is probably the way that would be the way that I would describe the environment that you train in, Nicola. I mean, from the long conversations I've had with Chris and yourselves and Holly and Ellie, and there's Cameron, there's lots of different fighters in that gym. It's a very modern thinking kind of environment.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's good, because we have heard that from the gym level perspective, equality reigns supreme. I mean, there's no issue at all in the gyms these days where you have proper training, proper equipment going on for both the men and the women. The opportunities, though, you speak of kind of catches me by surprise, because I thought the opportunities aren't as many for the women. And Nicola raises the question of, shall we say, the quality of opponents. Our own show host, Scarlett, of the Female Fist, who herself is a fighter, is constantly telling her people who she's interviewing, for example, that one of her biggest issues is trying to find an opponent other than the same one she fought a couple of months ago.
And yeah, I mean, she would be right. I mean, what Nicola said there, she hit the nail on the head. I presume you're talking about the Lionesses show in Aberdeen when you had to fight Tasha Boyes for the second time. I mean, a lot of, again, I mean, they're all right depth-wise. I mean, especially more so throughout this pandemic, because, we're obviously in America. I don't know what the situation is stateside, Canada, all that kind of area. But in the UK, politics can be a big thing here. I mean, we've got two separate regulatory bodies. So you've got the British Boxing Board of Control, who license some fighters, and then you've got the British Irish Boxing Authority, who that I'm licensed with, and that Nicola's licensed with as a fighter. And there's a growing pool of female fighters there, both in the UK and internationally. But the problem that you do find, I mean, like Nicola had in her last contest where her opponent had to pull out, and obviously there's a wealth of them, or a whole body of international fighters that they probably could have looked at bringing. It wasn't my card, by the way, it was an Assassin's card, but I know they looked at bringing fighters over because of the pandemic, and obviously quarantine rules and all these different things. There was no way that they could get someone over, so it was just unfortunate sort of set of circumstances really for Nicola that she did have to get back in with the same opponent and fight again. But I mean, like I say, I touched on the point here in the UK, it's probably more politics that prevent a lot of opportunities for the girls, and the boys. But more so for the girls, and as much as, like I say, you've got these two regulatory bodies, two licensing authorities. One, Bieber is quite happy to work with the British Boxing Board of Control to, regulate fights, let their fighters get in with the Bieber fighters. But unfortunately, from the British Boxing Board of Control viewpoint, they won't allow that to happen. So straight away there, you're reducing your opportunities for your fighters, because I know in Nicola's case, Nicola's a really talented super flyweight. She's got the WBL European Super Flyweight Championship fight coming up in September on the Brighton show, and if she's successful in that one, then we do a lot of work with the WIBA, which is one of the longest, one of the longest, it's been around the longest amount of time in regards to championship fights for the girls. It was along with the IWBF, I believe, in the 90s that it formed. So if Nicola gets through in September, then you're going to be fighting for an interim WIBA super flyweight world title, which is brilliant news. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, the problem is there are still within boxing, I was talking to you before we went live, that I've written a couple of articles in the last couple of days that I've put out on the website, there's still that inequality is still there in boxing, it's and how do you break that down,
I know from the men's perspective, there's an awful lot of, it's very fractional. There's a whack of different organizations trying to reign supreme, if you will, not just among the matchmakers, but among the fellas, quite frankly, who are offering the titles and or the belts. It must be very confusing, not only for the fans to follow that, but I'm just wondering on the female side of things, if it's the same kind of consideration you're talking about over in Europe, where you might have right now you've got two competing authorities. But what about, does it get confusing when you want to establish a career? You have to choose a path, so to speak. Is that one of the problems?
I don't think it's so much choosing the. I mean, the be all and end all of it is regardless if a fighter signs with Bieber or they get licensed with Bieber or they get licensed with the Board of Control. They're still a professional fighter.
Right.
So UK side of things, I mean, in Nicola's case as an example, sorry Nicola, I'm talking for you, but feel free to stop me. But
Bye.
it's kind of, Nicola's licensed with Bieber, but she's a professional fighter, and as we've just said, she's going to be fighting for titles. She's going to go a long way in the sport, as will a couple of the other girls in her gym that are also extremely talented. Real solid amateur credentials. Moved across into the professional scene with Bieber, and they're already starting to challenge for titles, which is great news. All it does mean is that unfortunately, historically, you know, when you think of UK boxing, you talk about the British titles, the Commonwealth titles, the European titles, you know, the traditional British Commonwealth, which are regulated by the British Boxing Board of Control and their partner organisations, you know, European Boxing Council as an example. So it does mean that, you know, because the two organisations can't work together, that would stop someone like Nicola, a fighter like Nicola, fighting for the traditional British title, but it doesn't prevent Nicola from fighting for the other titles that are available. You know, Bieber work with a lot of other, you know, regulatory bodies, WBO, IBF, WBA, you know, they're all still there. And obviously we have our own British titles, our own European titles, which Nicola's fighting for. But what it does prevent is that maybe those fighters that are a European champion licensed or a British champion licensed with the British Boxing Board of Control at super flyweight, Nicola's weight, that unfortunately they wouldn't be able to fight. You know, that would be stopped. Not from the Bieber perspective, but from the board side, they would stop that because and I hate to say it, but, you know, it comes down to, it's all about money, isn't it? You know, it all comes down to money at the end of the day and who gets the biggest slice of the pie. But other than that, you know, Nicola's she can go throughout the world and fight whoever, you know, as long as they're not licensed with the British Boxing Board of Control. She can go anywhere else in the world, fight any other fighter for any other title. And so from that respect, it's fine, you know, but it's a real tragedy, I think, when we're talking about equality for athletes, women boxing, you know, it's just a shame that link up can't be made and those politics put to one side and let the fighters do what they're trained to do.
So rather than addressing this on a 1-to-1 level, is there anything preventing you, Trevor, from assembling a team of female fighters, bringing them over to the Americas and setting up, if you will, a tour where you might go from city to city, fighting top Canadian fighters, fighting top American fighters, even going down to Mexico, fighting some Mexican fighters? Is there anything preventing that sort of thing happening?
No, not at all. Not at all. As I said, yeah, Nicola could go, and any other, you know, anyone else in the gym, any Bieber fighter can go around the world and compete, the same as any other boxer. It's just internally within the UK, because of that political stance at the moment from the British Boxing Board of Control, it just prevents that from happening at a local level. When you're talking globally, I call it local and global, you know, but globally, you know, it's Bieber, you know, but then we've got a growing number of licenses. I mean, Bieber, I think female fight wise, it seems to be more and more sort of joining up and signing up, you know, but globally, the world is their oyster. They can go and compete for any title in any other country without any problem at all.
So then is it a question of management? Is it a question of Nicola having the right management to enable her to develop a career where she's able to be paid properly as a professional fighter?
I mean, management-wise, Nicola is like I say, trained by Chris Boyle, and Chris is your manager as well, isn't he, Nicola?
Yeah.
So from that respect, like I say, Chris and Bieber generally, actually, if you look on the British Irish Boxing Authority website, it is all about equality, and they are very much the passion and the ethos and the values they hold are about equality for pay, equality for, you know, conditions. It's all about making sure that the environment's fair and that the fighters get what they're owed. You know, it's not about, I did, you know, when I was looking at which body I would like to license myself with as a promoter, you know, I looked at the traditional British Boxing Board of Control, spoke to different people, and then obviously I spoke to people that were involved with Bieber. And then when myself and my team kind of looked at it, we thought, you know what, we really like and love what Bieber are standing for. You know, that's very much, the female fighters are very much at the heart of everything they're doing at the moment. You've got Lee McAllister up in Aberdeen himself. He's still a professional fighter at the moment. He fought for the WBO African title, which was groundbreaking because that's the first WBO title fight licensed under Bieber in the UK, and that's back in May. Again, very, very passionate, and I believe he's taken some fighters out to Africa to fight very soon. So, you know, there's a lot of very clever, very knowledgeable people on board Bieber that are really trying to push. And like I say, it's from our perspective, that's why at Sportinarium events, that's why we licensed with Bieber for that reason, because from what I've seen and what I've witnessed firsthand now, it is the fighters at the forefront of everything they do. It's not about making money for the people in the background.
So are you then able to pick and choose fighters from gyms or training centers in any given city and set them off against each other on a card? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, in UK wise, I mean, the fight card in September, we've got fighters coming from all over the country that are taking part. We've got Sussex, Kent, Surrey, Essex, from the north of England with Nicola. We've got people coming over from Somerset. They're coming from all areas of the country to fight, and we are hopefully. Again, it all depends on pandemic at the moment and quarantine rules. There's COVID, which is putting everybody's making life difficult for everybody. But the idea is that hopefully we're going to manage to get some international fighters over. So it's going to be a real kind of worldwide card, should I say? It's going to representation from everywhere, which is the plan. I know Nicola's opponent in September. You've got, is it Vanessa Taborda? Is the
from Argentina.
She's Argentinian, so. Nicola's going to be facing her for the WBL title, Women's Boxing League title. So, like I say, that's going to be the final eliminator for the WIBA title in December. So, yeah, it's a truly international card. We've got people from all over appearing, so it should be a good one. Well,
that's really, really good news from my perspective, because the more tournaments you have, the more cards you have, the more tournaments you have, the more relationships you're establishing with not just the fighters, but their managers. And you're kind of, if you will, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but you're developing, if you will, a league where fighters can, whether it be city-based, if they're, traveling around from city to city fighting, or whether it's actually properly organized, where all these fighters are actually paid. Because quite frankly, it's not just about the fans showing up in the arenas these days. We now can sell tickets online. I mean, that's what we've set up our technology to do. For example, when this COVID thing is over, we have the technology to begin to broadcast fights online, where if you have 1,000 people paying 10 quid, you got 10,000 extra quid.
Exactly that. I mean, all of our fights are going to be televised on Fight TV.
Yep.
So, that's another great, it's great for exposure for the likes of Nicola, and other fighters that are on the card. So, I mean, at Fight TV at the moment, I think they've got the last card up in Aberdeen globally, because obviously you've got the ability to replay as well. So, you can watch it live on the app, or you can, if you're busy and you're out at the pub with your mates and you want to watch it at a later date, you can come home and log in and watch the replay, But I think that the count for the last one was something globally, because obviously it goes out across the world. It was about 205 million views for the fight card in Aberdeen, which you can't, that kind of exposure is invaluable.
Yeah.
It makes these guys a household name. The next day, fighting for titles on Fight TV in front of a global audience of 200 million people. I mean, even, some of the more well-known promoters, here in the UK would struggle to kind of get those figures,
Absolutely. I mean, if there's one positive benefit out of COVID, it's been our eyeballs have been directed to these screens now, and somewhat adjusted, if you will, in terms of how we view our boxing. As opposed to the old days when my father and I would go to the arena and pay for a ticket to watch a live event. It's quite now normal for me to sit in front of my screen here and watch it, no matter where they are fighting in the world. And so I think that must really benefit the women, because we have seen an evolution of professional women fighters has grown exponentially. We've noticed anyway in the past couple of years. I mean, yes, Clarissa Shields put a bit of a damper on the whole thing by saying she wasn't being paid enough. But surely there must be an awful lot of young women now entering the ring because of I'm going to say Katie Taylor, for example. She's really making a splash. She's making what Nicola's doing is fantastic. She was just highlighted on Mike Orr's show on Friday, as a matter of fact. So I don't know if that was coincidence or not, Trevor, but yeah, she was highlighted by Mike, who does his show on Fridays, all about what he calls knockout artists. So Yeah, so it's really good to know that there are young women who are now being inspired to get in the ring and fight professionally, not just as a nothing wrong with being an amateur, of course, but look at it as a job, if you will, something that they can make money at.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Nicola, as an example, I mean, this is. I mean, when we talk about equality for female boxers, I mean, that's a whole massive subject, And me personally, I sit back and think the more eyes. This is why I'm saying the fight TV. The more eyes we can get onto fighters like Nicola, Elliot, Holly, our stablemates, the more eyes we can get on, the more young girls that will look at that and think, you know what, that I want to do that. These are role models. I want to hold them up. This is how I want to be. I mean, that must be wonderful for the likes of Nicola, because I know on Twitter's a massive tool for the fighters now, when we're talking about technology. I know Nicola's got a growing army of followers on Twitter, and a lot of those are young girls that are maybe like starting out in the fight game. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nicola, because I see the tweets.
Yeah, you're right.
But, and they look to Nicola and, they use her as inspiration to kind of, for themselves to follow in her footsteps, which, is brilliant. But I mean, I think that the whole issue at the moment when we're talking about equality, when removing licensing bodies and organisations, it's a case of there's been a lot of chat. Talking about Clarissa Shields reminded me, there's herself. There was Michaela Mayer who fought. I think she fought last night, didn't she? And defended her WBO title, but. A lot of these girls now are talking about wanting. I know Nicola's not a fan because we've had this conversation, but a lot of these girls are talking about wanting to become, 3-minute round fighters. And for a lot of them, I think their thinking of that isn't just about actually, it's a case of when it gets to 2 minutes, I've just warmed up and now I've got to stop and have a minute's rest and start that whole process again.
Right.
Whereas I've had that extra third minute, extra minute, then maybe I could have ended that fight. But I think for a lot of them, they're looking at it in as much as to say, well, actually, if I fight 3-minute rounds, championship distance is 12 rounds for men, 10 twos for women. But if they could do even 10 3-minute rounds, then it starts to move them up to become more equal to the male counterparts in the fight game. So, and with that equality, they can then start saying, well, actually, now I can start demanding similar kind of money to
Correct.
what my male counterparts, what the male boxers are getting, and I totally understand that thought process,
I understand the thought process.
Yeah, I mean, Nicola, you fight 2-minute rounds. So I mean, I've never, you're the boxer. I'm just the mouthpiece, as you can tell. But it's. To tell us about 2-minute rounds. I mean, does it? I mean, I know from your last fight because I was there. But I mean, and you destroyed the girl in front of you. What was the? I think she said her soul left her body or something. So caught with a body shot, and we felt it ringside. It made me want to be sick, let alone her. But 2-minute rounds. I mean, you tell us. I mean, does it get to the point? Do you get to 2 minutes and think, or do you think actually?
I think it might just depend on the type of fighter you are, and I get the whole thing about the equality part, and but I think just depending on the fighter, like I use the 2 minutes and I like to get stuck in and like make it exciting. Where I think if the 3-minute rounds, it might slow it down a little bit, but that's just my opinion. I just think maybe the 2-minute rounds just make the fights more exciting because they've only got 2 minutes to get in there and do what they have to do, and I just think the 3 minutes, I don't know if it'll just drag it out a little bit, because I think sometimes depending what fights you watch, if you're watching a male fight that's 12 threes, I think it can get to like round 6 and they're still like getting into the fight, taking the time, and it can get a little bit boring. But then I think the female fights where it's 10 twos, it's just exciting straight from the off because they know they've only got 2 minutes, 10 rounds to do.
No, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of the thought isn't just about the the money side. Well, I'm sure a lot of it is to do with they can say, well, actually, if I'm fighting 3-minute rounds, then I should be getting equal money. But you hit the nail on the head. I mean, because not all male boxers knock people out, do they? There's some very stylistic fighters out there who are super talented. But how many? Let's be honest, hand on heart, how many times have you sat sometimes watching a fight, with male participants and thought, oh my god,
Yeah.
this is really boring, and I've still got
Yeah.
7 rounds. This is going to go the whole, this. And by the 12th round, you feel like you're talking about your soul leaving your body. That's how you feel. You sit back and you think, oh my God, I've just waited. That's 45 minutes, an hour. I'm never going to get back. That was.
Yeah.
And from talking to a few of the female fighters like Nicola, 2 minutes, they know that from the ding ding of the bell of the first round, they've got 2 minutes. They need to start fast.
You've got to work. You've got to start working quick because you've not got as much time.
So it's, is it a case of, I don't know. I mean, what is the answer? I mean, what sort of feedback do you guys get? You talk to a lot of people,
We do. I'll give you a great example. It was brought to us the other day by someone else, and she said, take a look at tennis. It's not like there's any different rules, male or female. And if you go back in history, when Billie Jean King beat, I think, Jimmy Connors way back, Billie Jean King proved that women were just as powerful as men at a sport such as tennis. But they don't change the rules for men or women when they're playing, even though they play women versus women and men versus men. But there's no rule change. There's the same rules, same length of time, if you will. So for me, I would argue that the women should be allowed to fight 3-minute rounds. But I also agree, because I've heard this as well, that you've only got 2 minutes, and I have to wonder why Nicola's sitting there with a 3-0 professional career, all knockouts, because she's got in there, done it quick, done it right, not left it in the hands of the judges, because that's the one thing that we hate, is these decisions that could go the wrong way. So we like to see a clear decision, and preferably by knockout, quite frankly. And the fellow I mentioned earlier, Mike Orr, he does a show on Sundays with Cedric, and I don't know what it's called, the Knockout Show. And they highlight knockouts, but they're few and far between, quite frankly. They're not as frequent as we might expect. Now, on tomorrow's show, maybe Inui will get the Knockout of the Week award for his liver shots last night. But I gotta hand it to the women. The women are giving us exciting fights, fight after fight, and we're loving it. And we're kind of surprised to hear that the women are having these issues still, because men control the organizations up top that make these decisions and impact the women.
And you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that is a lot of the problem, is that if you look at a lot of the regulatory bodies, licensing bodies, across the world, I'm not just talking UK, I'm talking, Boxing Council, WBA, IBF, WBO, the power is at the top, and the power is held by the men. And it's just an unfortunate fact. I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole social science of it, if you like, because I could sit here till 5 o'clock tomorrow morning talking about it. But it's, it's that whole patriarchal kind of viewpoint. It's about masculinity, challenging masculinity. It comes down to money. A lot of mainstream promoters still at the moment still don't view women's boxers as being able to provide them maybe with the income that their male counterparts can bring in. I mean, there's some great promoters in the UK that are doing some fantastic work with the girls. Katie Taylor aside, who is phenomenal, and she could hold a card on her own with no problem at all, I'm sure. Yeah. But on how many promotional posters do you see? You've got, I won't mention any names because I might get sued, but you get these promotional posters, and you've got all of these heavyweight men and middleweight men, super middleweights, light heavyweights, and then you've got a WBA championship, female championship fight going on, but the men might be fighting more for British titles or an international title, and then but they've got this big place on the poster. But the girls that are fighting for that world title, I mean, one of Nicola's good friends fought for a bantamweight title recently, but it's kind of, they've got a small little picture of them right on the bottom there, so and so is fighting so and so for the WBA super featherweight female title, but Joe Bloggs, who's fighting for the international title, who's which, let's be honest, if there's levels, if that was a man fighting for the WBA super featherweight title, they'd have a big place. But generally speaking, the girls are still stuck down on the bottom of the fight promotion poster, as a little kind of afterthought, oh, we better stick them on there.
I agree with that.
Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
how I look at it, you know. And
Yeah.
if you look at and I'm not bigging myself up, but Nicola are vouch, you know, if you look at the posters we're doing now for Sport and Aerium, the girls are front and center. They're big there. They're on the poster because they're the ones that, you know, they're the ones getting in the ring. They're the ones fighting. They're fighting for titles, and it's just those little things that we're trying to change, you know. And we're trying to move that into the public consciousness to make sure. I mean, like I say, social media does have a massive part of it. I know Nicola and there's some other fighters on there that are doing magnificent things, but there's still that hegemonic masculine mindset, patriarchal kind of approach from those at the top that still want to keep the girls down there, you know, because it's too much, feels a bit of a threat to let them kind of move up, you know, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Absolutely, and it confuses us because we see the exact opposite in the MMA side of the world. You know, I think the Americans, you know, 20 odd years ago started promoting women very equally to the men, and now look at where they rank. I mean, whether you're talking about wrestling or the mixed martial arts, you know, these women are viewed on the exact same level as the men and are given equal distribution, if you will, across the marketing platforms. So again, it boils down to an equation, I think, of management on one side, like having proper management, proper representation, a talented group of people who are managing the careers of these women's fighters right around the world, not just in the UK. But also the marketing side of things has to change as well. And I think you guys are doing it right. You're promoting women as women should be promoted as equals on that poster, so that whoever they are, whether the fans are a balance of men and women going to see that fight or paying online, they know that they're getting full bang for the buck, as they say. You know, and it's not. And I absolutely agree. I mean, there's been even for us over here, we see it all the time. Big posters with big men, and then a little corner. Oh, there's women on the card, is there?
Exactly that. And, you know, but again, they may not, I'm not saying that people are, you know, the people, the promotional company, whatever, that are designing that poster, maybe subconsciously, they don't even, it's a subconscious thing. It's just, it's kind of conditioned into, you know, into society from a very young age. You're a girl, you're a boy, you know, and the girls, you know, years ago, it was like the men went to work, the girls stayed at home, looked after the children, and they made the dinner, and the husband came home, and how was your day, darling? You know, that kind of course, society has moved on from that, but there is still that small minority. It's still there in people's minds. You know, they don't realize that maybe it is there. And when they're designing those posters, they may not even realize that that's what's going on. You know, you've got Derek Chisora's all big, and then you've got Nicola Hopewell down the bottom here. You know, it's just, it might just be subconsciously done, but it's still going on. And those are the kind of barriers that we need to be pushing back on, you know, and saying, right, so Nicola's fighting for her European title in September, and on our poster, there is Nicola, you know, and she's there, she is saying she's fighting for that title. We've got a couple of lads on the bill, men. Sorry, I'm talking all English now, but lads, and, you know, they're down there smaller because they're making their professional debuts or whatever. But that's not saying that actually we're giving them less importance than Nicola, but from a professional angle, that she's fighting for a title, they're making their professional debut. You know, they might have had 2 or 3 fights, but Nicola's fighting for that professional title. Holly's fighting for that professional title. Ellie's fighting for that professional title. So they deserve front and center on that poster, you know, and that's kind of the way we look at it. And then you're not fooling anyone either. When people look at, like you've just said, they're going to look at that poster and they're going to know that when they go to the battles at the beach on Brighton, that's what they're going along to see, you know?
Absolutely. And again, just before we went on the air, I was mentioning the demographic shift. I mean, you're migrating away from the Fraser Ali type era of heavyweights fighting, and it's men, to now a very mixed group of fighters, both large and small, men and women. But you've got an entirely new demographic out there of young fight fans who appreciate not just the entertainment value, but the personalities that are involved as well. So it's up to the management teams, these marketing teams, to market Nicola herself, not just to allow herself to be viewed on social media channels, but to get people to get to know her, and to say, yeah, when she goes into that ring, I hope it's kind of like how you support your home club. And, you've got your fan favorites, quite frankly. And how else are you going to do it? In the past, even in any other sport, pick a sport, it doesn't matter. But that's how they would market it, on a personality basis. That's why you would support the team. That's why the stars are the stars, and they're paid the most, because they do what they do best. They score those winning goals. And in this case, Nicola knocks out her opposition fighter. So she should be paid the most, if you will. And this is what the younger demographic out there that I'm talking about, that we've discussed in previous shows, is interested in seeing. They're interested in seeing the best of the best. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman fighting a man. It matters to them that they're seeing the best of the best go toe to toe.
Exactly that. And if 3-minute rounds do become part of that, then, like we said earlier, I don't think it's a bad thing. But it's again, that should be down to choice. I think talking about the 3-minute rounds, I was just looking at an article while we were chatting there, and a lot of it should be choice. If Nicola decides she wants to fight 2 minutes, then do the 2 minutes. Maybe the lower weights, and then maybe the higher the weights go up, maybe they could do 3 minutes. I don't know, but it is all about the knockout, And you're right in what you say about generationally. I think nowadays people do want to see knockouts in boxing. I mean, what does interest me, sorry, just jumping around a bit, it's just because I was thinking you were talking about the MMA.
Yep.
And I know nothing about MMA. I really don't. And you just said, it got me thinking back to these whole 3-minute and 2-minute round scenario. Do female MMA fighters fight the same amount of rounds as the guys, and this under the same time, or are they too? Do they fight lesser minutes or lesser rounds? Or
that's a great question. I don't seriously don't follow the UFC at all.
No, see, I'm just because you mentioned it there, just because I'm getting old.
It's a great question.
I'm getting old, so it's kind of sometimes these things take a little bit to come into my brain. But I was just trying to have a look at them, but I can't find anything. But
I'm gonna hazard a guess. My guess is no. I think the women at the UFC level fight the same amount of time in a round as the men do. Why would they fight less?
I just wasn't sure.
You know what I might say though, to your earlier point. If it's a belt or a title that Nicola's fighting for, I would hope it's a 3-minute round.
3-minute rounds.
If she's part of an undercard for some reason, whatever, it's not a championship, then maybe the fighters have agreed beforehand it's 10 2-minute rounds. I don't know, but I just think there should be a level of equality. If it's a championship, a title, a belt that they're going for, then you'd have some level of equality among the fans' perspective anyway. That they are paying for a championship fight, and that championship should be, let's say, 12 rounds, 3 minutes a round, whether it's men or women.
And I would agree. I mean, I think, to be honest, hand on heart, I mean, I know Nicola again likes the 2 minutes, but I think if for it to be truly equal, and for the girls to
apparently she doesn't need 2 minutes.
She does. Nicola, she doesn't, to be fair. I mean, she give her 10-3, she'll still probably finish it in 2 rounds anyway, regardless. But it's I think that is probably the only way forward for equality, is to say the girls fight on equal terms to the guys.
Yeah.
And then there is no excuse for any managers or promoters or licensing bodies to say, well, you get paid slightly less, like women do in tennis with prize funds. We were saying about the different tennis tournaments, they do 3 sets to fight, the men do 5, and the prize money is slightly less. And that's an easy way around it, isn't it, for the people, the paymasters, to say, well, actually you get paid according to what you do. You fight 10-2s, I fight 12-3, they fight 12-3, so therefore they get more money. So if the girls, can fight on an equal footing with the guys in regards to round time and distance of fights, then I think that would probably be the only way that that they would ever be able to push for equal money, and for like a world title fight, a big title fight, then they should be. I hand on heart think they should be getting paid the same as the men anyway, because at the end of the day it comes down to ticket sales and TV viewing numbers and all the rest of it, and that should be a big part of it as well. But I know that the WBC is a prime example. They've Suleiman has already said, the president of the WBC, that all the time that he's sat presiding over the WBC, that he will never allow women to fight 3-minute rounds. He will never allow them to do 12 rounds. So, you know, if that's the head of the president of the WBC that stated that a few years ago, it's never going to happen. Not while I'm here. They're not going to be doing that. And the chances are that's never going to happen, because he was using medical evidence. And I use that very loosely, from a convention where he said that a doctor had said that the girls were more prone to concussion than their male counterparts, and hence, you know, having the longer rounds would put them at more risk of sustaining a concussion, that extra minute, you know, which it was like a formula that he used. It was like dehydration equals fatigue equals a heavy blow, then that means they're going to be concussed. But why would that be any different for the guys? You know, and when he was talking about this, it was about that there was something to do with the bone structure in the neck of a lady is different to the bone structure in the neck of a man, therefore it makes them more prone to getting concussed. But I think since that came out, there's been kind of chats from and even the doctor that they credited those that statement to came out and said, but actually no, that's not exactly what I said. That the point they were saying was there needs to be more research done into the effects of 3-minute rounds on female fighters, you know. And but the problem that you're going to have with that is that if the medical professionals are coming out and saying, well, actually, to allow your female fighters to fight 3-minute rounds, we need to do this research. Who's going to pay for that research? You know, this, and it all comes back round to that money, doesn't it? It's like, well, who's going to invest in that research? You know, if the WBC, head of the WBC, say, never am I ever going to allow 12 rounds of boxing for female fighters, then the chances are that they're not going to invest in that kind of money into that kind of research. And, you know, I think what's got to happen is that all of these regulatory bodies need to get together, and they need to put funds into doing it. You know, it's the only way it's going to happen. But all the time it comes back to what we were saying earlier about the power being at the top of the men.
Yeah,
they're not. The chances of them investing that kind of money are very, very slim,
unless the returns are there.
Unless the returns are there, and this is how they get around it, by saying, well, actually, this comes back to it's like really, it's the whole cycle. You know, it comes back to a lot of the mainstream promoters don't see the value. They don't think they're going to get a return on their investment, you know, through the promotion of the girls, you know.
And I think this is probably where you're going to break the mold, so to speak, because I'm going to hazard a guess here and say that there's a different pay structure with your fighters, the way you're structuring your events, because you
fight for free. Nicola fights for free. No, I'm joking.
Good girl.
They don't.
But I'm thinking to myself, if you're more along the lines of pay-per-view online is going to generate much more revenue than we would if we were holding it in an arena, and then a lot more money is available to pay for the fighters.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes up the chain. The more money that's made available through more and more tournaments. I'm still staggered by this medical opinion that women are somehow built differently and can't sustain. Like me, I'd be knocked out within a flash. You know, so I can't believe that the medical opinion is holding back the ability of women to fight a 3-minute round, as opposed to just boxing common sense. Just they're fighters, they're boxers, they've been trained, they've been conditioned, they've got technique, they've got style, they've got talent. What would prevent them from fighting a 3-minute round? It's the sweet science, after all. It's not just a brawl. It's not a slugfest. It's legitimate, if you will.
And it's exactly that. I mean, I'm sure Nicola will tell you. I'm sure in the gym, you know, I'm sure you do more than 2-minute rounds when you're in the gym, and you probably spar with men. You know, I doubt you know. So it's that whole argument. You know, where does this was just one. You know, one convention that the WBC had. They brought this doctor out from one of their medical research facilities that made this statement, and from what I've seen, there's been no further research undertaken into it. You know, they've turned around and said, no, it's never going to happen. Not doing 12 rounds, not doing more than 2 minutes. You can do 10 twos, and that's our stance, and it's never going to change. But straight away they're saying, oh, that's not down to sexism, that's down to protection. But does that not take, sorry, I'm getting all philosophical, but does that not take you back to that whole male hegemonic masculinity, patriarchal kind of oppression? We're not doing this, we're not going to undertake this research and invest that money because it's not because we're being sexist, it's because we're protecting you, the fighter. But that whole ethos of protection, that in itself is unequal, because they're saying, well, actually, we're wrapping these fighters up. We're looking after you. I'm a man. I'm going to look after you. I'm not going to let you do 3-minute runs because you might get hurt.
Right.
They're boxers. They're fighters. They're in the gym every day, and they're sparring. They're probably sparring for longer than 2 minutes. So why do they not get dehydration, fatigue, and they're taking heavy blows in the gym, I'm sure, in sparring. Nicola seems all right to me, not appearing concussed. And it's kind of, it comes back down when you break all of these things down and you look at them, with a rational mind. You look at the information and you absorb it, and you look. It does all come back to the men at the top, the power men, be it the WBC, the British Boxing Board of Control, which if you look at their board of the British Boxing Board of Control, the directors, it's a limited company, it's all men. You'll struggle to find a woman amongst any of the ranks of any of these organizations. It is all run by men. So it's a case of that needs to change before we're going to see any changes for the girls moving forward. Like I say, for us, working with Nicola and Chris and Bieber, we want to make it equal. We want to make sure they're getting paid the correct money. They get this at the end of the day. It's these girls that are getting and guys that are getting into the ring, putting their lives on the line by fighting, taking blows to the head, and so they should be paid equally for doing it. As Nicholas should get paid exactly the same as any man that gets into the ring that's taking blows to the head. What's different? The anatomy.
I'm curious, Nicola, is your training regimen just the same as a man's training regimen?
Yeah,
exactly.
There's a group of us at the gym, and yeah, we all have the same. We all have the same training. We all go to the gym at the same time, do the same things. The only thing that's probably slightly different is the bigger men. Like if we do a weight exercise, they'll obviously do heavier weights than I was because I'm only a super flyweight. But that's the only thing. That's the only difference in our gym. But times and everything like that are exactly the same.
Yeah. So you're trained as equally
yeah.
As any man out there, and conditioned to be able to. It's like a marathon runner. I mean, you can't tell me that you've trained any less, therefore you can only handle a 2-minute round. I mean, you're arguing you enjoy the 2-minute round because you don't really need 2 minutes to finish off your opponent. But realistically, we're trying to figure out how to make this fair for not just the fighters, the competitors, the management staff, the training staff. Everyone needs to know they're all going to make $1 at the end of the day, or a pound at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, what I can't understand, I can't believe, I'm still blown away by this medical opinion. But what I can't believe is that you're not allowed to fight a 3-minute round, like literally not allowed to fight a 3-minute round.
Yeah, see, I do prefer the 2 minutes, but I think that's just my boxing style. But if they did move it to 3 minutes, like I'd do the 3 minutes. It's not like I've not done 3 minutes before, because when I was an amateur, probably my last 12-15 amateur fights was 3-minute rounds. They were 3-minute rounds. I mean, I know it's not as many rounds, but I have done 3-minute rounds before, and I've sparred 3-minute rounds in the gym before. So it's not like I've not done it, and I would do it if we had to. I just prefer the quickness and the excitement of the 2-minute rounds. But by all means, if they were to swap it to 3 minutes, I'd not argue it. I would do it.
I'm glad to hear it, because even take a look at a sport like ice hockey over here, and you have it there too. The women's teams play 3 20-minute periods, as do the men. It's not because we think those poor women are going to be tired out and that we better only give them 15 minutes. No, they get 20 minutes on the ice. per period, as do the men. So I can't understand this illogical argument, quite frankly, of the medical profession saying we can't allow the women to fight for 3 minutes because they might injure themselves. That's ridiculous.
And I guess it goes back to the equality of the training in the gym, because we do the same training as the men anyway.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, there was a fight for the WBA, World Box Association, interim, interesting around Nicholas. I think it was at flyweight, interim WBA female flyweight. That was between Estrada and Esparza, Marlon Esparza, Estrada. I can't remember her first name, but they did fight over 10 3-minute rounds for that particular title, and I think it was in Nevada, which it was like it set a precedent, really. You know, they did fight for it, and they did it, but it ended in the 9th. I think there was a clash of heads, and one of them got cut. I think it was Estrada that got the cut, and the fight was stopped in the 9th. It was, and it's remembered for its brutal savagery. I think is the only way. You can go onto YouTube and find it, but that still remains to this day the only 10 3-minute round championship fight for female boxers, and I think Esparza said they did that because when it came down to negotiating it, they could get more money for doing those rounds, and neither of them, they fought the 3 minutes, or it only went the 9 rounds due to the cut, but neither of them showed any different ill effects to what they would have shown if they'd done it over 10-2s, apart from obviously one of them had a head cut, which could have happened if it had been 2-minute rounds, from a clash of heads. So you can't time when that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, so they had that one fight, and then that was the end of it. Then it stopped again, and we've gone back to this cycle of it's got to be 2-minute rounds, And I know that there's a growing cohort of female boxers globally. Like I said, I've mentioned Michaela Mayer, and I know there's quite a few. Clarissa Shields, who's recently gone into MMA anyway, so she'd know the answers to the MMA. We should have got on, but it's. They want the 3-minute rounds, because I think for them, then they can truly turn around and say, look, we're on a equal standard with the guys now, so you need to treat us as such. And I totally appreciate that. I think that's their right. I just all the time that we've got these males that are running the, which sounds weird because I must be some sort of male feminist, I get it. But, all the time we've got these men at the top that are making the rules. I just can't see it changing anytime soon, because they will just go back until that research is done, which it appears that people aren't going to be paying for. The regulatory bodies aren't going to pay it, quite clearly. It's going to be left to the smaller kind of promotional companies and regulatory bodies such as Bieber. I know Bieber would probably quite happily look into getting that research done in the UK, but then it's a case of how do we conduct that research when, for example, if we were to get Nicola, if Nicola was to fight for one of those titles, we couldn't do the research because they wouldn't allow her to do the 3-minute rounds. So it's a really tricky kind of how do you get around it? I mean,
I would argue be up to the fighters. A super good example, which was brought up by Mike on Friday, the recent Ebony Bridges fight. I mean, take a look at her eye. After that fight. I mean,
you're exactly right. I mean, they talk about, that was again 10-2s. I mean, her eye, when Nicola knows Ebony really well, they're friends. So, I mean, you've probably spoken to her. I mean, the eye was really bashed up. And I think that was from a clash of heads, wasn't it?
It was from a clash of heads, yeah.
From a headbutt, but she managed to get through the whole fight, with that big bump on her eye. Whereas a lot of guys fighting 3 minutes may well have turned around and gone, do you know what? I'm out of here, So it comes back to that, doesn't it? So, if fighters, if the girls are showing that actually, and I think there was talk about going back to that research. There was a lot of discussion around pain thresholds and things, which made me absolutely laugh, because I thought, well, women have a better pain threshold than guys. There's no. I'm sorry, but there's no getting away from that, for obvious. And I think Ebony Bridges probably evidenced that quite distinctly in her fight with Courtney, Shannon Courtney.
Yeah.
Whereas she stayed the course and, went the distance, and like a true warrior, many guys, I'm not saying that they would have done, but some guys maybe would have thrown the towel in and gone, no, look at my eye, I want to go and fight another day, or the
Well,
corner might have pulled them out.
Absolutely. And take a look at it from a fan perspective. I mean, how many boxing fans out there were expecting that kind of fight? You know, Ibani and Shannon, they were both the poster girls for boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of expected a poster-ish fight. But in fact, we got an absolute bloodbath. It was amazing. It was a great fight.
Great fight.
Mm. Oh, it was also, I mean, I hold my hands up. I mean, little story behind this with Nicola, you know, when we were doing predictions for who was going to win that fight, I did pick Courtney, and I'll hold my hands up and say I did that. But it wasn't because I thought that
I did too.
It wasn't because I thought Bridges wasn't capable of beating Courtney. It was just because the circumstances of that fight. I knew if it went the distance, that it would be very difficult for Bridges to get the win, you know. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the performance she put in, you know, would put a lot of men to shame. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I think she would be, you know, there's likes of Ebony, even Shannon, Tasha Jonas, you know, Clarissa Shields, Katie Taylor, all of them. They're more than capable of doing the 3-minute rounds, you know, and you know, showing that they are more than equal to the guys that are fighting, you know.
And from a fan's perspective, for those fans who appreciate what these fighters have put in terms of the hours training, hours conditioning, not to mention their natural talent going into that ring, you know, we want to see that fully exploited, if you will, not limited in any way because some older man thinks that young girl can't handle that kind of pain or punishment, you know.
It's exactly that. I mean, I know we're running out of time but you've only got to look back to, I'm sure you've heard of Jane Couch, who took the British Boxing Board of Control back in the late 90s. She took them to court, you know, so she could get her professional fighter's license because she was a woman. It was illegal, you know, this is the 1990s, the end of the 90s, 20 odd years, you know, just over 20 years ago. It was illegal. Totally illegal for the girls to fight in the United Kingdom. They just couldn't get a license. So she literally had to take them to court to enforce, you know, under discrimination laws to get a license to be able to box professionally here in the United Kingdom, you know. And but you know, obviously they lost. They had to issue her the license. But even after she got the license, it was still a massive struggle for her to get fights in this country, you know. And I think you know, gradually as time has gone on, and that was again going back to that at that time the Board of Control was run by all men, and what it says to me is they haven't learnt their lesson, because what's happened is here we are 21, 22, 23 years later. Okay, it cost them a lot of money and they had to issue her a license, and she still had lots of battles after it. I'd recommend you go out and buy her book. She's got an autobiography that's on Amazon, shameless plug, but give it a read because it's very enlightening. But here we are 23 years later, and the Board of Control is still all men. And they're still, in a roundabout way, unless you're fighting for a certain promoter in this country at the moment, you know, a lot of the girls are still struggling to get that. I know we've been in a pandemic, I get that, but a lot of these girls are still struggling under the board. This is Bieber-wise. I mean, Nicola will vouch that, you know, all the girls are getting the fights and they're getting run out, you know, which is great. But under the board, unless they're with a certain promoter, then they're literally on social media with a bowl, you know, please get me a fight, I need to fight, you know. And that isn't right. And that's because the people at the top are men. And it comes back to that, you know. So that's my theory on it all. You know, there needs to be change. There needs to have the research done. There needs to be changes at the top of these boards. You need to have more women, ex-fighters, you know, the likes of Jane Couch, or, you know, there's plenty of female fighters that are out there that would be a real asset and would bring a lot of value to these regulatory sort of licensing authorities. Get them on the board, get their input, get their thoughts, get them out there amongst the gyms, talking to the fighters at grassroots, bringing the girls up through grassroots, get them all involved, you know, have those conversations and get those changes made. And then it's going to be better for everybody involved in the sport, you know, being Bieber, British Boxing Board of Control. But for the fighters generally, it's going to be better for them. Well,
I certainly agree. I mean, I certainly agree that this generation of young fighters, Nicola included, is inspiring another generation of younger fighters to get in the ring and have some fun and bash it out. Because all the female fighters we've talked to have said how much fun it is. You know, on one hand, it was a bit trepidatious, probably their first time going to the ring. But after that first hit, shall we say. That was it. I'm hooked, and I'm not leaving the sport. And that's what we've heard from all the female fighters that we've talked to. So we are surprised that these issues still exist in the sport, these hurdles for women to overcome still. But as we've agreed, it's mainly because there are these older men stuck in their ways, to be blunt, who won't allow rules to be changed or rules to be adapted even. And one of the suggestions I had made is whether or not there could be more international tournaments set up that would bring elite women together to fight and maybe there already are. But
I know here in the UK. Sorry, interrupting you, Graham. But here in the UK, there is a women's league being set up which is absolutely breathtakingly refreshing, but by a female promoter. And that's another point. I mean, I'm here as a male promoter, but as you can tell, I'm passionate about making sure that the women move forward. But what we do need in the sport is more female boxing promoters to really shout for their fighters. And like I say, here in the UK, there is in the works for a women's boxing league. And I know that's going to be coming together, I think sort of September, October. They're looking at starting that. That's through Bieber again, a promoter via Bieber, who's working hard to make that happen. And from us, we're looking to team up with a promotional company in Australia, and we are going to be looking to put on international sort of women's boxing events between across Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And it'd be lovely to come to Canada, Commonwealth countries, So that's what we're looking at doing. So it is going to happen. It takes small steps to make large changes. We get that, and we are going to get there. But yeah, I think, personally speaking, women's boxing leagues are needed. You need more female promoters. There needs to. I mean, just thinking again, Carly Sauerland, I think it is, has just announced that the the World Boxing Super Series, there is going to be a 130-pound super featherweight division, all female series, which is great news. That's a big step forward. So take the hat to him for that. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, there needs to be more change done. More research done. Need to get more female promoters on board. They need to change the regulatory bodies at the top and have more women involved in that. And then I think we will see the changes. I think it will happen.
Well, it's great news for the fans, because women are providing excellent fighting, and that we're enjoying. But we're surprised we're not seeing more of it.
Well, you've only got the fight of the night when we're talking about Ebony Bridges v. Champ. That was the fight of the night on that card, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who else fought on that card? People probably don't even remember now.
Who remembers? Okay,
that tells you we need to know that.
3 out of 3. 3 of us don't remember. Yeah.
Exactly. So who else was on that card? The one that stands out is the Courtney v. Bridges fight. Everyone
Absolutely.
That one.
It was a great fight, and a showpiece, quite frankly, as to what we, the fans, can expect in the future, especially when there are more and more elite fighters pitted against each other. It'll only improve not only the talent base, but Nicola's position, for example, establishing herself in her weight class as a dominant champion. And that's probably what you want too, Nicola. I'm sure it's to be recognized for what you've done, the work you've put into it, and hopefully a decent paycheck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's the dream. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure it happens. So, yeah, I mean, again, big shout out to Chris Boyle, Nicola's coach. And like I say, he's got such a talented stable of fighters. There's Nicola. He's got a 17-year-old Holly Tao, who is phenomenal featherweight, fighting for a youth world title on the Brighton card. Got Ellie Coulson, middleweight. She'd probably that sounds very promoterish, but I'm sure that she would give any of the top middleweights currently in the world a run for their money, and so he's got a very talented stable of girls there that are really going to come through. And I think all of them, Nicola included, are going to be massive on the boxing scene, globally. So sod the United Kingdom, by the time they get out in the world, they're going to be big names. I'm sure of it. Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. We really are. I mean, we're hearing there's an awful lot of young women inspired, of course, by the Olympics coming up. And there's a lot of great amateur fighters looking to turn pro eventually. So I think the crop, if you will, is going to get bigger, and the cream will rise to the top. You'll have more of those elite level championship bouts, and the more the merrier, quite frankly.
Exactly. And cream, you're talking about the cream rising to the top. I mean, again, sorry, just quickly before we go, when we talk about example like Nicola's weight, super flyweight. We were talking about British titles, Commonwealth, European. There aren't any British titles with the girls either. So I was completely incorrect when I said that. For the males, there is, but for the females in this country, in the United Kingdom, they cannot fight for British titles because the board don't allow. There isn't one. So that's removed from the equation straight away. So again, equality is not at play because the guys can fight for British titles, whereas the girls can't. So it tells you what you need to know.
You learn something new every day. So
Yeah.
why don't you just create a title?
The Bieber have got a British title, and I know that they're going to be looking to open that up to everybody to fight for. So Bieber do have a British title and a European title. So, but I know it just came back to when we were talking about, earlier on about the board and, how the Bieber and the British boxing board of control fighters can't, but they couldn't fight for a British title anyway because there isn't one. So that takes that's a defunct argument that I presented there because, like I say, it wouldn't matter anyway because there isn't one, which is tragic. And they put that down to, they say there's no depth, but then we can counter argue that with actually, if you worked with Bieber and allowed our fighters all to work as one to get and fight each other, the depth is there straight away. You've got plenty of fighters that can contest these titles. So, get off your blazers, stop being old farty tennis players and worrying about what's happening at the social club and, playing bridge and drinking your whiskey. Let's sit down around a table. Let's make the sport equal for the girls. Let's work together and get these titles on the line and get these girls fighting.
Hear, hear. Good stuff. Thanks very much for joining me today. I appreciate your comments, appreciate your insight and your input. Thank you very much. Nicola, good luck to you and your career.
Thank you.
And hopefully, and I know Mike Orr wants to have you in this show because he's, like I said, he's all about the knockout artist. So please sort something out with Mike because he's dying to talk to you.
I've passed him your details. I believe he emailed me the other day. So
okay, great, fantastic, good stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll get Scarlett to have a few of your girls on her show as well. So all good stuff. Great to hear. And thanks again for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure. And sorry if I've waffled too much, but I can't help it. So boxing promoter, what can I say?
Promoters. And again, good luck, Nicola. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay, bye-bye now.